You are sitting in a box. It's less than 1.5 meters wide, walled in by cold brick on 3 sides. You can't stand up fully. You can't lie down straight. Inside are 2 wooden planks. One serves as your desk, the other as your seat. At night, you push them together to form a bed, where you curl up like a shrimp. For the next 3 days and 2 nights, you will eat, sleep, and defecate in this brick cell. If you die in here, and deaths do happen, your body won't be carried out through the front gate. That would be bad luck. Instead, they will drag your corpse to a hole in the wall and dispose of it discreetly. Welcome to the exam cells. But here is what makes this extraordinary. You aren't a prisoner. You are one of the fortunate few. You have earned the right to compete for something that could transform not just your life, but your entire family's destiny for generations. This is the story of the Imperial Examination, or Keiju. For over a millennium, it was the world's most sophisticated meritocracy, and eventually, its most perfect demonstration of how the pursuit of fairness can destroy excellence itself. Today, we examine Part 1, the paradox of perfection. How China built a machine to find genius, then optimized it until genius became impossible. To understand why millions of men willingly walked into these cells, you need to understand what was at stake. In medieval Europe, social mobility was an illusion. If your father was a peasant, you died a peasant. Blood determined everything. But in 605 CE, the Qing Dynasty introduced something revolutionary. A test. Just a test. Pass it, and the son of a farmer could advise an emperor. The Qing Dynasty inherited and expanded this system throughout the 7th century, transforming it into the backbone of governance. The rewards were staggering. A Jinshi degree holder was exempt from taxes. He could meet officials as equals. He became part of a protected legal class with access to power, wealth, and prestige that would flow through his lineage. This was the original meritocratic dream, invented 1,000 years before the West had universities. So naturally, the competition became brutal. Harvard's acceptance rate today is 3.4%. Seems impossible, right? In the Qing Dynasty, passing the entry-level exam to become a Shengyuan had a success rate of 1 to 2%, and that was merely the qualifier. To achieve the final Jinshi degree, the cumulative pass rate was roughly 0.016%, 1 in 6,000. Yes, you could retake it for decades. But that's not mercy. That's a longer death sentence. Here's where the story takes its tragic turn. The Keiju didn't begin as a trap. During the Qing Dynasty, examinations tested poetry and policy essays. The system wanted cultured minds who could compose verse and design tax reform with equal grace. By the Song Dynasty, it had matured beautifully. It produced remarkable polymaths like Su Shi, the poet official, and Wang Anshi, the economic reformer who attempted to redistribute wealth and break up monopolies. These weren't obedient bureaucrats. They were innovators and critics. But there was a tension building. How do you make genius measurable? How do you standardize excellence? To combat corruption and subjectivity, each dynasty added reforms: anonymous grading, standardized formats, clearer rubrics. Each reform made the process fairer and slightly more rigid. By the Ming Dynasty in the 15th century, something fundamental had changed. The exam was no longer asking, "Are you brilliant?" It was asking, "Can you follow the template?" Enter the 8-legged essay, or Baguan. Formalized around 1487, it was an essay structure with 8 precisely defined sections. Every argument required a parallel counter-argument, matched in tone, rhythm, and character count. You could only quote from the 4 books and 5 classics. Deviation meant failure. This wasn't designed by a tyrant. It emerged from bureaucratic logic. If everyone writes identically, grading becomes objective. If everyone uses the same texts, bias disappears. But when pursued to its extreme, fairness becomes its own tyranny. Then, in 1644, everything changed. When the Manchu Qing Dynasty conquered China, they faced a fundamental problem. They were ethnic outsiders ruling the Han Chinese majority. The eight-legged essay, already rigid under the Ming, became something more sinister, a tool of political control. The Qing didn't just want bureaucrats. They wanted intellectuals too busy memorizing dead texts to question foreign rule. While Europe experienced the scientific revolution and enlightenment, China's brightest minds spent decades debating the proper way to format sentences about Confucius. This wasn't accidental decay. It was strategic lobotomy. Emperor Qianlong's Literary Inquisition campaigns saw thousands of books burned and scholars executed for seditious writings. The message was clear. Original thought is dangerous. Obedience is survival. The eight-legged essay became the perfect pacification tool. It convinced educated men they were pursuing excellence while systematically neutralizing their capacity for critical thinking. Men spent 30 years memorizing texts until their ability to think originally had atrophied completely. So what happens when you create millions of educated, ambitious men and then systematically reject 99.98% of them? By the 1842, the Qing Dynasty was fracturing. The Opium War had ended in 1842 with humiliating defeat to the British. Natural disasters ravaged the countryside. The population had exploded to over 400 million, while arable land remained stagnant. Taxes crushed the peasants. And in the midst of this chaos, the examination halls kept producing the same output year after year. Thousands of literate, strategically trained men with nowhere to go and nothing to lose. The Keiju wasn't causing the collapse, but it had spent centuries stockpiling the perfect fuel. Among these thousands of rejected scholars was a man who had taken the exam 4 times. 4 rejections, 4 confirmations that the system had no place for him. His name was Hong Shu Quan. In 1843, after his final failure, something inside him broke, and what emerged from that breakdown would kill more people than World War I. In Part 2, we follow the explosion. You'll see how a failed student turned his examination training into the organizational blueprint for the deadliest rebellion in human history. Subscribe now. What happens next will show you why a test score can be more dangerous than gunpowder.